First, Stephen Webb, Head of Government Reform at the Policy Exchange. On this point, Stephen, good afternoon to you. I mean, there's a simple, I suppose, straightforward answer. It's just the inevitable direction of travel. It's the organic process of technology. What did we think was going to happen once we got smartphones? So you could look at it that way. Of course, the concerns, which I'm sure you're more familiar with me, is that, hang on a second, the government have all my ID. Not a good look.
I think it is something that the public should welcome, that the government has had times where we've actually got quite ahead of, the government got quite ahead of things on IT. There was a time when the MOT and the was being automated, and I remember people were talking about how amazing that was. A few years ago, we had the Tell Me Once for people who'd suffered a bereavement, rather than having to tell dozens of different agencies. But I think in recent years, the feeling is it's slipped behind a little bit. So I quite welcome the idea the government's pushing this forward again. I think I understand the concerns about rights, and having worked on technology programs in government myself, the privacy and security is always a big part of them. In reality, compared to many of the private sector companies, the government doesn't have that much data on you, really. If you think of how much financial information do you give them compared to the amount your bank knows about you, the amount, let alone how much your internet service provider knows about you. So while I think this should be taken seriously, I don't think it should be a sort of the be all and end all. The main thing is, can the programs be delivered?
Well, indeed. I mean, that's always the big question when you're asking governments to deliver anything. It's like turning an oil tanker around, of course. So I don't think this is coming in next Tuesday or anything like that. But you're right. I think a lot of the concerns, Stephen, we've had this afternoon hasn't been from people who are specifically worried about a passport or a driving licence. That, on the face of it, is sort of common sense. It makes things much, much easier. It's where it goes next. It's whether, your carbon footprint, will that be registered? Will you be told that, you can only use X amount of petrol a week because of the net zero agenda, and your phone will literally cease to work to make petrol payments because you've exceeded your allowance, that kind of stuff. Can you book a flight because you've overused the amount of air travel you're entitled to? Your vaccine status and things like that's where it starts to get a little bit Aldous Huxley, right?
Yeah, so people can't have it both ways. Either the government is going to, would be an extraordinarily difficult thing to deliver even if they wanted to. So I think I think just getting these basic things right is going to be challenging. And as you say, it's not coming in tomorrow. It's not coming in till 2027. I think there'll need to be a discussion bit by bit about what we want on the app and what we don't. And the government minister has said it's not going to be compulsory, this wallet or this app anyway. So it is a service that people can choose to use or not. The idea of a kind of a Chinese social credit system, that really is, well, I imagine it'll never happen. It will be extraordinarily difficult to do anyway.
But that is the point. I mean, the Chinese have sort of done something similar, and, where the Chinese go, we used to say where the Americans go, we lead, we follow. But, there is a sense that China is going to overtake and become the big boy on the central global stage. And, if they can do it, why can't anybody else do it?
It's a political program. That why would you want to do it? And clearly they have a massive surveillance requirement for it, and they put enormous amounts of resources into it. I don't think there's any suggestion that anyone in government is interested in that. There's been a big government report that's been talking about just how government is struggling to get the right people in, get enough people in to pay them enough. Government is really struggling to deliver the technology programs it has on its plate at the moment. So in many ways, I think we're already too ambitious in what we try to do. Again, from my experience in government, smaller, simpler, quicker, fail fast, move on is the way to go. And some enormous program of a sort of social credit system, I think, would collapse immediately if anyone even tried it.
So why do they need this system at all then? Why would they need a government wallet that has your passport and if it's optional, that's one thing, but you can see how it would very quickly become non-optional. And I don't mean that in a conspiratorial fashion, just from the admin side of it. We don't make paper passports anymore. We just send it to your phone. You can imagine that happening.
That's not what ministers have said. And, obviously there are a number of people who just don't have smartphones even now, and it's unless you were actually to legislate to force them to have them. I think genuinely the government believes that there's going to be an appetite for this. People will want it, and I think they're probably right, frankly. So I think most of the population will be quite keen to have it. It's one fewer thing to lose or to keep hold of. it'd be a long time before you then needed to worry about if you wanted to extend it to everyone.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have an ID system. It's not a requirement to have a driving license. It's not a requirement to have a passport at all.
At the moment, that's very true. Yeah, you don't have to drive and you don't have to travel, I guess, if you look at it that way. Listen, Stephen, thank you for your time. He's head of government reform at the Policy Exchange.